All right, miniature enthusiasts. I'm about a dozen or so plays in. And in this vlog, I wanted to offer my thoughts, my impressions of Godtear, how the game plays, the narrative, what I like, and ultimately being a miniatures game, a skirmish-based game. The question for me is, what place would this game, in this case Godtear, what place would this game have in my collection? Is this the type of game that is regularly going to be played with my friends or with a group? We're going to get involved. Is this the type of game that, okay, well, it'll hit the table every now and then. It's kind of a secondary type game. We'll play it every now and then. Or is it the type of game that is going to be hard or difficult for people to buy in, and it's just going to kind of sit there on my shelf and taunt me? In terms of every game, what I'm interested in is the first tier. Obviously, I want to invest in a miniatures game, a skirmish game that is going to be quick to play, fast to play, enjoyable, a lot of tactica, a lot of depth. And given the diversity of miniature games right now, if you've been following my channel, I'm a massive Warhammer 40K enthusiast. A Warhammer 40,000, it's a sci-fi based game. And while I love big games, I love smaller type games. Kill team, combat patrol, small games. So the question really for me is, jumping into another miniatures game, it's got to do something really different. It's got to really make its mark, and it really has to bring something unique to the table. Otherwise, why not just play any of the number of miniature games that are out there, or already having Warhammer 40K armies and 40K models and having multiple armies, multiple warbands, just invest more in that. So that was kind of the background and the framing. What attracted me to Godtear was the narrative and the complexity of play, specifically involving the God tiers themselves. And that is really something unique that I don't know other miniature games, board games, skirmish games necessarily do right now. So let's talk about jumping into the narrative, and let's talk about the production, because it is a miniatures game. The miniatures are important. I mean, we could be just playing on a map with some tokens and some counters, kind of old school Avalon Hill. But if I'm playing a miniatures game, like, I want to be wowed by the narrative. I want to be wowed by the miniatures. Production value for a skirmish game, not even pre-assembled miniatures, one-piece miniatures, is fantastic. These are some of the best miniatures, mass production miniatures, that I've seen. Every warband is really, really unique. That you have a champion and you have a number of followers. The champions have personality. They've got flavor. They look really awesome. The followers look fantastic. They're not just all the same miniature, all the same model. They have different poses, different war gear, different weapons. So even though the stats are the same, visually they look great. The banners, which represent a way to claim God tiers in the game, each one is unique and kind of reflects the personality and the style of the warband. You look at these miniatures, they look fantastic as is. Now, they're color coded. There's 4 different colors that represent the kind of the archetype of the warband and what their general powers are. So, for example, red boxes, they're slayers. They're basically going out and slaying everything. Think warlords. So having them color coded gives you an idea, because you play with multiple warbands on each side. It gives you an idea tactically of like what unit is doing what, where, and how it's doing it. So that's the reason why you've got these 4 colors. But the duality is, I've already started painting my warbands. The miniatures are so fantastic, you're like, I have to paint them. So we're going to have some kind of rings. I'm going to get some plastic rings and paint them to maintain those colors of blue, yellow, green, and red. The production value itself, the game is played on a board representing this shattered realm, this shattered world. And we've got some ruins, we've got a wasteland, we've got like a dungeon. The boards look great. Great card stock, great printing, great detail. You want to get in and like start playing, start throwing down, start rolling some dice. And the presence is big enough that we've got some tactical viability in terms of placing god tiers. They're kind of the duality of the objectives and the terrain. So the board's big enough that you got a lot of tactical diversity, but it's a small enough self-contained skirmish game that it's not, by no way is it a table hog. It's pretty reasonable. You've got some tokens, you've got some dice. Tokens are really well done. Dice are custom. They look fantastic. They have this kind of white on black contrast. They look great. You've got your player mats, which help you with the cards of managing the different warbands. The only really would be one thing I find critical. The cards themselves for the warbands, they have stats. They have two sides. So the phase of the game, the beginning of phase, you use the stats and the abilities on one side. Then when we move to the second phase where we're fighting, you flip them over and there's different stats and different abilities and you use that. The cards look fantastic. They're easy to read, but they are really, really thin. Really thin. And what surprised me was you have, on average, 3 cards for each warband. Some have 4, a special card. So you're not talking hundreds and hundreds of cards in the game. They couldn't have been printed a little thicker. And they are going to get some wear and tear because you're flipping them over. Every turn, you're flipping them over. So I normally don't sleeve my cards. It's a rare game where I do sleeve my cards. But I sleeved all these cards just because we're going to be constantly flipping them and kind of cycling through them. That's really the only complaint that I would have on the narrative, on the visual type side. And that's really kind of a minor gripe, but the artwork, the layout, everything about this game just is like, I want to jump into this world and I want to fight over these god tiers and forge my legend. But how does that cycle over into the rules? Because we can have amazing visuals. And again, the miniatures are fantastic. Production value, great. The board looks fantastic. I mean, I want to use these boards for other skirmish games that I have. You look at it, how does it play? You look through the rules. And the first interesting thing, and this was a huge selling point for me, just looking at the demo games and looking at some other YouTube channels that presented how does the game play. Jumping in and playing the game, again, being about a dozen or so plays in, it plays even better than expected. You look at a skirmish game, and you're looking at, because it's a low model count, and it's kind of this warband idea, you're looking for terrain. I mean, terrain is vital. Being able to block line of sight, being able to block movement, having impassable terrain, possibly elevation, maybe getting cover against certain attacks. The interaction of terrain is very, very important, especially in a low model count game, because if you have a warband that's 5 or 6 characters, we're kind of generalizing skirmish games, you lose a character, 1 or 2 characters or 1 or 2 models, that's big. We're not talking about something like Warhammer 40,000 where I've got like 60 Space Marines on the table, multiple tanks, other support pieces. You killed 20 Marines this turn. It's like, okay, so what? I've got like tons and tons on the table. Losing miniatures in a skirmish game is huge. So terrain is vital. There's no terrain in the game. Looking at the boards and the visuals, there's steps, there's ruins, there's broken pieces. There's no terrain. You can move into a hex, no problem. So the terrain, the god tiers themselves are the terrain. And the terrain changes, not randomly, but tactical. And this took a little while to wrap my head around, where based on the different missions, it configures the placement of god tiers on turn 1. And these god tiers are like these literal magic tiers from the gods, crash down into the planet. They give you powers, they make you stronger, they make you faster, they make you bigger. I mean, that's why these warbands are fighting over these god tiers to claim them, to claim this mythical archetype power. So you have them starting out on the board in different configurations in different places, and then at the end of the turn, depending on the mission, you might place more, you might place less, you might move them around, you might reconfigure them. And this has a duality in that the minions, the followers, they can't pass over onto these Godtear tiles. So it's literally blocking their ability because the magical power, I guess it's like kind of like superpower radiation. It's so much it would kill them. They can't move over it. The only thing that can move over or through are the champions themselves. Now, there's a couple of specials where you can fly over things and do things like that with the different warbands. But looking at the base Tactica, so you have this terrain that is ever changing, but at the same time, not only is it ever changing, it's vital to scoring the game, being able to plant banners and manipulate and claim. So tactically, this means not only does the board change, you really got to think what's going on, where it's like, okay, I can throw down some Godtears, the life mission, it's growing, and I can block some stuff off, and I can hinder my opponent's ability to move. That's huge. If I'm playing a ranged type warband, that's huge. If I can block you off because you can't cross the Godtears, and then I can plink away, like that's a win. But then in theory, depending on your warband, am I literally giving you Godtears over on your side of the board where you're going to potentially just camp and banner farm? How am I going to beat that? I mean, it's very, very interesting. And the terrain mutates based on who wins or loses the turn. So it's dynamic. If I win this turn and I get to place, maybe I build it up on my side, but that can switch. You can win the next two and place and build it on your side. It's a lot slicker and a lot more genius than it looks. The play, the fluidity is absolutely awesome. So I loved that. Now we jump into the warbands, and the management itself is really fun because the cards have combos on it, and they're themed. They're themed based on the warband. Ways to attack, ways to buff, ways to manipulate units, push and pull units, way to cast abilities, throw around magic or issue in a challenge and affect stats. So as you play, it's not just even the Slayer classes, which are like really powerful warriors. It's not just about rolling dice and smashing. It's about positioning. It's about combos within your warband, but also within the other warbands that you're playing. So if you can play 1, 2, or 3 warbands on a side. If you play one warband, it's about getting the best combos out of that warband. If I'm playing 2, then it's like, how can my first warband get combos that will affect and make my second one better or my third one better? So you find out immediately there's so much tactical play and so much positioning. Combat is an important point of the game, and it is dice driven, because when it comes to combat, you got to hit, there's armor, there's an evasion. You roll legendary, you're going to smash stuff, but it's not just a dice fest and it's not an auto win. You can negate a lot of that by really detailed positioning, combos, and planning. So we have those aspects of the game that I was like, wow, this game really, really has a lot of flavor and a lot of depth to the warband. So we're continuing on. The last piece that I really enjoyed, and at first I was very skeptical because, again, this kind of breaks the mold of war games. It's about killing other models because it's a warband and we're there to get that glory. We're there to seize the Godtears. But killing doesn't necessarily take you out of the game. It just kind of slows things down. What I mean by that is if your champion can't be killed, your champion can be knocked out, which makes sense. The champion's like literally infused with Godtears. So if you get killed, your champion gets knocked out, you have to spend next turn a champion resource, one of your points, action points, to kind of get back up and ready yourself. So I found that to be very interesting, very sophisticated, because it's not a process of elimination, which means you can't go for the alpha strike. It means I can't just take 2 Slayers, run up, kill your champion before you can act, and now you're out of the game. A lot of war games, a lot of miniature games do that. I hate the alpha strike. I could try to alpha strike, I could try to punk your champion, but your champion's not out of the game. But there is a penalty for that, because not only if I kill your champion will that gain me some points to potentially winning the round, but you have to at least pay a resource to get back in the game with your champion. But again, no 100% elimination. I found that really unique. Likewise with the followers, when they get killed, they give up points, which helps to win or lose the round, but you can recruit them. You can bring them back. So the times that you're willing to give them up for points, kind of just fodder type wasteoids, you can, and you'll get them back. Other times where you want to keep them, you can. This idea that losing followers, being able to pull them back, like, wow, the game's about killing, but if you have a bad round or two, you're not out of the game. You're not going to get completely wiped off the table. And likewise, if you're building just an Alpha Strike Killy army, they work. That type of warband does work, but your opponent's got a little more bite to it. Let's talk about scoring. A lot of war games, skirmish games, miniature games, you have multiple turns and you get points, and then at the end of the turn, you look at the mission points and you have a winner. What's interesting is, well, the challenge with that in many traditional skirmish games was you kind of know early on. There's the possibility, turn one, certain war games, if I can run up Alpha Strike you, punk you, take out models, they're not coming back, you can't res your champion. I've weakened you so much. I've weakened your dice output. I've weakened your area control. I've weakened your ability for mission objectives. It's turn one. The game's kind of over. I mean, we'll play it out. I always play it out no matter what because I want to show that respect to my, my friend playing the game. But where's the fun in that? Where's the fun in that? Or where's the fun in getting turn two, turn three, and you realize, one bad turn, I'm wiped out. Godtear gets around that in that it's a sliding scale. The turns are worth different points. So the first warband side to score 5 points wins. Turn one is worth 1 point. So you win turn one, you've got 1 point. You're good to go. Turn two is worth 2 points. So if you win turn two, now you have 3 points, I have 0 points. If I win turn two, I have 2 points. You have 1. Turn three is the big turn. It's worth 3 points. So if I win turn 2 and 3, I have 5, I win. If you win turn 3 and you won turn 1, you have 4 points. So it's this sliding scale, and then turn 4 is 2 points, turn 5 is 1 point. Most of the games will play out towards the end, if not completely to the end. And it is very swingy where if you have a bad round, you can come back. You might have to have two good rounds or 1 good round, depending on where we are in the scale. But there's no Alpha Strike. There's no turn 1 elimination. There's no auto lose. I really, really, really enjoy that because it keeps you in the game. It keeps you in the narrative. And while it is a dice-based game, and those mechanics are there where we want to build dice pools and gang up on models and leverage the most dice and learn to manipulate the dice by gaining bonuses and learn to manipulate the dice for you by throwing penalties on you. I mean, that's all standard, Wargaming 101 / Skirmish Game 101. Godtear embraces that, but it gives you a way to negate that in that if you have a bad round or I roll legendary. Well, you roll legendary, and I just make some bad tactical mistakes. I'm still in the game. So how does this wrap up? This was only supposed to be like 5 or 6 minutes, but this game has really captured my imagination for the narrative. It's a skirmish game, but I feel like I'm playing a role-playing game with the scenarios and kind of getting into the warbands. And it plays fast. The rules are fantastic. It's 1 versus many. Lots of customization, lots of powers. You play 1 or 2 turns and you understand the mechanics. But the combinations of the warbands are absolutely infinite. There's 2 starter sets. The starter sets mechanically are the same with what they give you, but the theme looks a little bit different. They have 2 warbands, different, so you jump into that way. And then there's warband boxes that you can build and kind of push out from there. And the factions are completely interchangeable. That's the other genius thing about the game. I mean, I guess nobody's completely good or completely bad, but you can mix and match literally just like pulling them out or having a drafting type system. That alone also offers tons and tons and tons of combos. So a very, very unique skirmish-based game. I'm so happy that I picked it up, jumping into it, playing it, jumping in and painting it. Now the problem is I want to play it, but I also want to paint it. Just hits on all those levels. Absolutely so fantastic. Absolutely plays fast, ready to go, right out of the box. And even if you're skirmish heavy, miniature based heavy, this has a lot of unique 3 or 4 unique pieces that, as of right now, I don't see any other games coming close to this or replicating these very, very unique features.